Listen to the rumble. Listen to the roar. Slowly in 3. They'll be flying off 4. Watch them now.
On May 18th, 2019, I took the 1968 Ellison Sprint Car. That's the number 49, the red, white, and blue, really pretty race car, to Lincoln Speedway in Abbotsville, Pennsylvania, to be part of the Jalopy Showdown. The showdown, put on by my buddy Larry, it's a really cool traditional hot rod show and swap meet where guys with vintage race cars and motorcycles of all types get to run green flag laps on a well prepped dirt track. It's kind of rare to get to really stretch the legs out on these cars, and they let you do it there. They keep an eye on everyone. If it looks like you're getting out of shape or you can't handle it, they slow you down. But if you're in control and handling your own, they let you put on a show. About 7 or 8 years ago, myself, Joey Kerr, Mike Whitney, Kevin Gill, and a couple other guys showed up at the showdown at Lattimore Valley at that time, and we ran some laps and really left an impression. We hauled ass. We really, ran some really good fast laps. Joey Kerr and Mike Whitney and I, we can run wheel to wheel all day long because we grew up racing each other. We know each other and how we act, and we can put on a hell of a show. We had people running for cover from the rocks and the debris, and which is a good thing. People like that. And anyways, we've been asked back every year. The problem is back then, Joey, myself, and Mike, we were working on vintage sprint cars and some midgets and hot rods, and that's about it. Now we've all started to, luckily, we're very fortunate. We're starting to restore and work on and maintain vintage Indy cars, from Miller race cars to Indy Roadsters. And May is our busiest time of the year. May is, of course, the Indianapolis 500, and the Indianapolis Speedway has their vintage days on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday before the 500. Every year they bring out vintage Indy cars. It's the real deal, too. No recreations. The cars have to have been at the track, made laps back in the day, and it has to be the real car. The cars go out on the Indy Speedway. They get to run green flag laps there as well. And it's a really, really busy month for Joey and myself and Mike because we're prepping multiple cars and we're trying to get cars fixed. And when you wake them up and fire them off, you find things wrong. So it's always a last minute ordeal. Another thing about the week of Indy, it's been said that the Indy 500 is only good for causing a lot of traffic between some of the best dirt races of the year. I like the 500. I like its history. But yeah, that week you have, just this week, starting Wednesday, every year, Wednesday night is Terre Haute, the Tony Holman Classic. That is the longest annual running USAC sprint car race on the calendar. Sprint cars at Terre Haute, if you've never seen that, you have to go. It's unbelievable. Thursday night is the Hoosier 100. That is a 100-lap race on the 1-mile dirt track at the fairgrounds. Sadly, this is the last year for it. I could do a whole podcast on that, and we might. But for right now, I'll just say that the reason is they're going to cover the racetrack with limestone for horses so that the horses can practice there year around. And the race cars can't race on it. So the race cars got the boot in what is supposed to be the racing capital of the world. But we'll discuss that later. On Friday night is the Carb Night Champ Cars. Champ Cars on pavement at IRP. And I know it's called Lucas Oil Stadium or something now, but it'll always be IRP to the people that grew up watching Thursday Night Thunder. And then Saturday night, you have the Little 500, which is an unbelievably, just a crazy sprint car race. If you've never seen it, you really need to go watch this race. It's 33 sprint cars, started 3 wide, just like the Indy 500. They race for 500 laps. on a quarter-mile, extremely high-banked pavement racetrack. The best description I've ever heard of that race is it's like fighter jets inside a gymnasium. I'm the crewman on the Kevin Dorn crew chief and Machine Gun Ken owned Eric Gordon driven sprint car. I had to remember all the people involved there. It's basically the Hoffman ride that we won with Cody Swanson a few years back, and now Eric Gordon's in the seat. Machine Gun Ken has bought that car. He bought it the year we won, and the Hoffmans, they kind of wanted out of the Little 500 to begin with. And Rob, the son, told me the night we won, he told me if we win this race tonight, I'm done. I'm never doing this race again. And we won it, and Ken bought the car, and the rest was history. So Richard was always involved. He came back the next 2 years with Tony Stewart and Eric, but now Richard sadly has passed on. So we'll have a Hoffman sticker on the car, and we'll be carrying I believe we're carrying the 69 number even. So that's good. So basically what I'm getting at is it's really hard for us to get to that race. But I was able to sneak away this year because we're not running any of the front engine cars at Indy this year. We're going to be dealing with rear engine cars, so I got a chance to go. So no one else could make it. Joey had his hands full with Dana Meekum's cars, and Whitney had a couple local guys that they had to get their cars ready. And it wasn't in the cards for those guys, so I went and got there, took the sprint car there. It was an awesome event. Unfortunately, I fired the sprint car off, warmed it up. Everything was great. I had called in a big shoe. I called my buddy Van May, and Van May is probably the most beloved and legendary sprint car driver of Pennsylvania. He's one of the top five. And I called him and said, "Hey man, come on out here and run this car." And he gave me the typical Van May answer of, "Well, I don't know. I might think about that. Let me think about that. I don't know. I might come out. Where's it going to be at? I'll think about that. Okay, yeah, I'll come now." So it was all that in one phone call, and I thought, man, I hope he shows up, and he did. He showed up, and I took the car out to basically shake it down. I made 2 laps, and the car developed a violent vibration in the driveline. I think at the time I thought maybe we had broke the crank. It was that bad. And then Mike Whitney had called me on the phone just to ask a few questions because all the three of us, me and him and Joey, are always helping each other out. Mike called and said, "Did you notice the vibration when you pulled it out of gear?" And I hadn't thought of that. And I said, "No, I didn't." And he said, "Well, it's probably something in the driveline then." And the more I thought about it, he was right. So got the car home, and sure enough, the splines on the in and out box they've been in there for 10 years running really hard, and they are so worn that I believe they're literally jumping splines. So that car was done for the day. I hated to see it for Van because everyone wanted to see Van in the car. I hated to see it for Larry, my buddy Larry. I took the car there for him. He had advertised the car was going to be there. A lot of you fans were coming out to see the car, and I wanted nothing more than to put on a good show for you. But unfortunately, racing is racing, and the car broke, and we had to load it up. The whole venue only lasts about the time on the track only lasts from 11 to 2. So it's not like a big window where we could have torn the car apart and tried to fix it. As soon as the car was hurt, we were pretty much done. So once we were done, I looked at Van May and I said, "Hey, I'd like to record a podcast with you." And he was all about it. He said, "Yeah," he understood. I said, "We need to find somewhere quiet and somewhere we have electricity." And he said, "Well, let's go to my shop." So I followed Van to his shop. And our buddy Rich Bunning went with us, who's a photographer who's photographed Pennsylvania race cars for years. And it was cool that he came with us because he got some really cool pictures. And we went to Van May's garage, and the podcast turned out really good. I mean, Van May's stories are legendary. He has won over 70 feature wins in one of the toughest areas of sprint car racing in the country, which makes it in the world. He's won multiple championships, and he's survived 2 of the worst looking, most violent, scariest crashes in sprint car history. When you see video of the Port Royal crash, it looks like something out of a horror movie. It's grainy, it's dark, it's sketchy. It's bad deal. and he became the first race car driver to get airlifted out of a racetrack. They had just started the whole air care program, and he discusses what he remembers of that, which isn't much, but he does know what happened and whatnot. And then another crash at Syracuse he'll talk about, where luckily the car landed on all four wheels because the entire roll cage, the entire cage above the driver's waist was gone. He's just sitting there and there's nothing around him. And he somehow stood up and walked away from that crash. I heard a good saying of someone said that cats are jealous of Van because of all his 9 lives that he gets. And that's true. It was an honor to sit down with him and hear his stories. And it was cool because I got to kind of quiz him on some of the things they tried back in the day. Van was a guy that would try a lot of different things, and Pennsylvania was a hotbed for new inventions and new ways of doing things in sprint car racing. So sit back and enjoy this. It's about an hour long, and Van is the typical Van that I love and am honored to call a friend. So thank you very much. Enjoy. What we're going to do is, Van, like I said, I'll ask you a bunch of questions, and you can tell me any story, anything you want. We'll get going. Oh, man. So, Van, you and I have been buddies for a while, and I want to start off with telling the story of when I met you, because it's a funny story for us on our end. We brought some vintage cars up here to run at Lattimore Valley, and we came to the Williams Grove Old Timers event, and I'm going to guess maybe 08, 09. It's been a while, and I had Roy Carruthers with me, and Roy kind of knows everyone in the sprint car world, and we had Joey Kerr and a few other guys with us, and we rolled into Williams Grove, and we didn't know anybody around here, and Rich Bunning walked up, and he knew us from Facebook and jumped right in and helped us. And a guy walked up and kind of, just started talking to us right away and knew all about the cars and knew about us and said, "Hey, I got blueprints." And he looked at Roy Carruthers and said, "I got blueprints of your dad's super modified." And pulled out these blueprints, and Roy was kind of like trying to check it all out. And so he called Johnny Caples and said, "Hey, there's a guy here that's got blueprints of your super mod." And I guess Caples said something like, "Well, who is it?" And Roy goes, "I don't know. He kind of looks like Van May." And you went, "I am Van May." And we all said, "Oh shit, that's Van." And that was it. We met you then, and we all got taken back a bit, because whether you like it or not, you're a legend, and especially around these parts. And we're going to get to the vintage stuff of what we did in 09 and today and whatnot. But I want to do the typical deal and go back early with you. Say hi, and then let's go back. You showed me a picture of you on a go-kart, and I want to know who got you that go-kart. Was your dad into racing? What started this?
Let me think about this a second. We started racing go-karts probably in 1958 or so. They were having go-karts that were running at a shopping center, and they had been gathering there on the various Sundays. And I remember my mom went away, and she told my dad something to the effect of, I don't want you doing something with a go-kart. I don't remember what initiated, but we wound up with one. That was basically the start of it, was when we bought a go-kart from George Brazil.
Was this in Texas or here?
This is in El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, all this history was.
And what year?
In El Paso. Probably 58 or 59.
Cool.
This was pretty much in the early years of the go-kart racing. I mean, Art Ingalls and Lou Borelli built the first go-kart in California in 56 or 57, and it had just migrated out towards El Paso. And my dad owned an automotive repair shop, and we were always kind of competitive at everything we did. We got into go-karts, and that picture was a picture of me winning one of my first races, probably when I was about 8 or 9 years old, maybe.
That's excellent.
I was small enough that I had to put my feet through the hoop. I couldn't put them around it,
I saw that.
but it was fun, and that's what we did.
Man. Now, how long did you run that cart for a long time
Well,
as you got older? Or?
That particular cart probably was like the second or so that we had. It was made by Go-Kart 800 is what it was. It was a factory cart from Azusa, California. But we wound up with some Corettas and various carts, and my cousin actually went to, I think it was Mansfield, Ohio. Where was Mickey Rupp from? Mickey Rupp was, and there was like a nationals there. My cousin won his class in the nationals, and we started racing go-karts at the same time we were spectators as little kids at watching the super modifieds at a local racetrack there in El Paso.
That's so cool. What kind of engines were on those?
On the go-karts?
Yeah. Did you run? Did you eventually start running McCulloughs and
Well,
whatnot,
we started. The very first one was a West Bend 580.
Yeah.
And then immediately we went to McCullough's. MC10s and MC5s were what was commonplace at that time, which actually that's pretty early in McCullough's. The MC10 was the first McCullough motor that was made specifically for go-kart racing.
Really?
So we definitely got in on the early ground,
Yeah.
on the early floors of go-kart racing.
Do you remember at that time in go-kart racing and this I'm just comparing it to like what I know from go-kart racing in the 90s, 80s and 90s growing up. Were there any different kind of like tire compounds or setups, or was it just run what everyone had and kind of what you had to make it fast?
I don't remember any trick stuff, but it was important to have good motors, and my dad was very good at motor tuning. He knew what made them. He made them work, and my dad actually built a motor. Pretty much, he took a McCullough and stroked it and built a small cylinder that he had taken a Briggs & Stratton motor and broke the fins off of it to get the base sleeve the right size, and back there on that lathe that you're looking at, that little Atlas lathe, he made a jig where he could set the crank up and grind the stroker crank on it right there on that lathe. But my dad was very limit on go-karts. We had what was considered a Coretta, a pretty premier cart that was very light. My dad built real strong motors, and I was real small. My whole combination ready to go was 140 pounds with me ready to go. So my go-kart having a stout motor and me being light was very competitive with everybody.
Yeah.
I mean twins or whatever. And so we were kind of blessed with having a dad that understood about motors, and so it never hurts to have too much motor.
That's right. Now, when did you move this side of the country? How old were you?
I was not quite 21 when I actually moved here.
So did you start running big cars in Texas then?
I ran what they call a super modified. It was basically the same drivetrain as what that car is out there of yours. I remember buying a brand new set of 2-inch Hilburns, and it was a 327.
Did it have a little like kind of a adapted body on around the cage? Or not really?
Yeah, it was. It looked kind of like a California super
Those
modified.
are cool. Those are really pretty.
It had a CAE. That's what I tell you about. It had a CAE nose and hood, and then it was the flaring. Looked kind of like Johnny Capel's car in a way. I can show you pictures later of it, but it was a pretty decent looking super modified, and we ran against sprint cars at the time. That's before they had gone all two sprint cars. There was about a half and half combination.
Yep.
This was at home, and my brother was way more equipped to travel and race out on the road than I was, and he took off and went to Ohio to Speed Week and Nebraska and a couple of places, and he met Opperman along the way, and they discussed it about where to be, and Opperman had already migrated back here to Pennsylvania, and we just came here because this was the place to be.
Yeah.
I didn't go to high school dreaming of the days I got out of school where I could migrate back to Pennsylvania and race. I mean, I had no desire, no inkling of racing in Pennsylvania, but for whatever reason, this was where the best was. paid the most money. When we raced at home, if we got rained out, we had to run 280 miles one way, 330 miles the other way, or 600 miles the other way to go to any other racetracks. When I moved to Pennsylvania, I live right here basically in Hanover, and there's one racetrack 5 miles away and one 15 miles away and one 25 miles away. So we can race 3 nights a week and make a living of it, and that's why I migrated to Pennsylvania.
That's very interesting. And I've heard a lot of guys kind of say that same story of migrating to Pennsylvania because it was and still is a ground zero in a huge area for sprint car racing. I might have jumped the gun on going to the big car. Did you go straight from the go-karts to that super modified, or did you go into stock cars? Was there a jumper or
straight to the super modified?
Okay, cool.
Well, my brother bought a sprint car, a Don Edmonds sprint car from Ralph Parkinson, and when he bought that newer, more updated version, me being the little brother, I just kind of scarfed up on everything that was left, and that's why I wound up with his super.
Yep.
But then it furthered, and we bought a car from I can't even remember who it was, a guy in New Mexico. It was a very famous California car, one of the Flying Fords out of San Diego. The guy actually won first Pacific Coast. Jim Wood was his name.
Wow.
But anyhow, that's the car that I brought back to Pennsylvania, was the car that was a refurbished Hank Henry car.
When you and your brother moved to Pennsylvania, was it just one of the deals? You kind of sold a few things and gathered up what you had and just headed this way with no plan, or did you come and set stuff up?
In my case, I was just kind of out of high school, and I didn't have stuff or a plan.
No, just get to Pennsylvania and go racing.
In all honesty, I mean, had it not been for my brother coming to Pennsylvania, I certainly never would have come here. He was the tools and the jack and everything. I just had actually, as it turned out, I had a Corvette and a race car, and I just followed him around wherever he went, and one thing led to another, and then I got a ride with a guy, and then I ultimately built my own car, and I got some sponsors along the way that made things very good for me. Weldon Sterner in particular, who I raced most of my years for, he bought me good stuff. I mean, I had an aluminum big block.
Wow.
There was other people who had them, but I certainly wasn't spotting anybody anything. When I went to the races, I certainly felt like my car was going to be as good as anybody's.
Yeah.
I didn't have 10 of them, but my one race car was competitive.
That's excellent. When you mentioned earlier today that you had a job one time.
Oh,
was that when you got here?
Worst day of my life.
So
no, actually,
what did you guys do?
I don't remember having a whole lot of jobs, honestly.
Just
but
racing.
I did work when I needed extra money or whatever. I did whatever it took to make it.
Yeah, you guys had hands and tools.
Yeah,
and
I was not incapable. I could work if I had to, and I did when I had to.
Excellent. When you first started racing in Pennsylvania, was it an eye opener of how tough it was?
Well, I knew when I moved up here that's where all the best racers were, because they paid so much money in such a short distance. I mean, when I first came up here in 1971, probably a feature paid $900 to win. I remember running at El Paso, and I had a clean sweep. I had quick time, won the heat, and won the feature. And it paid $101, and that was it. And that was in the same time frame as it paid $900 here.
Wow.
There, if we got rained out, if we would run more than one night a week, we had to go to Dallas, or we had to go to Phoenix, or we had to go to Albuquerque. So just this made more sense.
Yeah.
And then when I got here, I managed to basically survive on what the race car made.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't have been possible without sponsors, but I was lucky because I had somebody else to spend the money to do what I wanted to do. And so how good could it get?
Were you and your brother racing out of the same hauler, same garage, same everything, or you guys had separate
A lot of the time we were
setups?
raced out of this garage, but not the same hauler, not the same anything exactly. Just my deal was
Your deal.
in a different deal than his. I mean, but a lot of it came out of here. But then pretty soon after we built this garage, he moved back to Arizona, and he ran some cars in Phoenix, I think, after that. But basically, this place here that is where I built and took care of most of my cars.
Excellent. When, what year was that you moved here?
I would say 71 because I wasn't quite 21 years old yet.
This might be a silly question to ask while I'm sitting in Pennsylvania and with Pennsylvania guys, but what made you choose coming to Pennsylvania as opposed to going after USAC and that route? Was it the money, or was it the competition, or just a different?
Well, for sure the
cars?
the money, and I had no desire to go race USAC at all. That was a whole different class of.
Okay.
I mean, they had. I didn't fit the USAC guidelines.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
But definitely, there was more money to be made right here
Yeah.
in Hanover than
I remember
anywhere in the nation.
I remember reading an article about Lynn Paxton having a big weekend where he won like an insane amount of money in one weekend. What was that? Do you remember that?
I don't remember the number, but if he won
It was like a
national
$100,000 weekend or something.
he could.
And this was back in the day.
Yeah,
know?
it was definitely pretty cost effective to run around here. If you were fast, you could prove it and make money doing it.
What was the car count like then?
You know, the stories always get embellished, but I would say pretty consistently at Williams Grove they had 40 cars.
Wow, really? Jeez.
I'm not saying they never had less.
No, but
but it was not uncommon to go to Williams Grove and there'd be 40 cars.
were you guys qualifying on a weekly show, or was it pill draw and heats and that's it?
I don't believe it was pill draw. I believe it was all points average.
Really?
Like the fastest guy, Mitch Smith, the fastest guys, they inverted the field, and they inverted 6. So there was 3 times 6 is 18. It was not uncommon for the fastest guy, like as in Mitch or whatever, to have to start 18th. But it was a points deal.
Throughout the year, like as the points went?
pretty much throughout the year.
Man, so them guys earned it.
Well, yeah, I mean they started to back, but what was so different then about cars versus cars today? I mean, whether it be Opperman or Mitch or Stevie or whatever, their cars might have been 2 seconds a lap faster than some of the back runners.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it was easy to make it look like, I mean, the guy could start 18th and be leading in 3 laps.
And have a chance, yeah.
Yeah, but just simply because there was so much variation in speeds. Right now at Williams Grove, one time I was there at an outlaw show, and I think the top 24 qualifiers were all within 0.8 of a second.
I noticed that last night.
I mean, I don't know where it was last night, but pretty stacked in there.
I mentioned that to your buddy at
Yeah.
the feature when they ran a good 10 laps hard in feature, and they threw a caution.
Yeah.
And I was amazed that the top 10 were all in like the same straightaway. They hadn't strung out. They had, they were all just equal.
Yeah,
they were all rockets. I mean, they were fast.
You know, people bitch about
God,
there is no passing and everything, but ultimately the fast guy always passes.
I saw passing last night.
Well, I mean,
then,
with the guy that won the race, he had to pass somebody.
Yep.
I mean, I think he fell back. Didn't he fall back to about third?
Yes, he did. And then
He passed cars. So
then DeWeese he was 9th or 10th, and then got up to 4th at one point.
I think he backed up a little bit there after the red flag. But I think DeWeese, you know, it's a judgment call. I think he kind of got screwed on the jumping call, but we used to joke about, you know, when it's jumping and it's not jumping unless they call it, and they called it, so it must have been jumping.
Yeah, what we're talking about is last night at Williams Grove in the heat race, DeWeese was starting on the pole, and I was down in turn 1 and 2, so I didn't see it, but DeWeese must have jumped enough to where they called it back, and they put him back to the second row. And honestly, I thought that was going to like light a fire and he would be coming on hard, and he kind of just didn't. He just
wasn't fast enough. I mean, there's not that much. There's not.
Yeah,
that much,
he was in there with killers.
There's not that much to play with. I mean, when you're racing with cars that are that fast, which
Yes.
obviously the Outlaws are the best in the business, and they get paid the most, and their whole thing is but when they come to Pennsylvania, they have to reckon with a few of the guys around here still.
How long, when you were 21, right in there, and you came here and started racing, how many years or how long did it take for you to be a front runner?
Actually, the first race I won was in '73, so it must have been a year plus before I was a factor.
Okay.
And after that, I won numerous races the rest of the years. I think the best year I had, I probably won 12 or 13 races, which is not a ton, but I was competitive, reasonably competitive.
There's guys that don't. There's a lot of guys racing Van that don't have 12 feature wins in their whole career.
Yeah, and
you know?
yeah, for sure.
That's impressive.
I had I was reasonably comfortable that I could make my car go as fast as anybody could with the same car. I didn't feel like I was leaving anything out because I was driving stupid. I might get myself in trouble sometimes, but I did feel like I made the race car go as fast as it needed to.
In that era, in Pennsylvania, you guys were bringing on the wings, and really, you guys were starting to run wings and starting the side, like your Nerf bars on the side had canards, and you guys were leading the charge for big cubic inch and big engines. And there was a lot of guys, yourself and Lynn, that were running big block Chevys for a while there. What changed about that? What made the big? I mean, did the small blocks just catch up to the big blocks, or was it weight?
Actually, the Outlaws kind of castrated deal when they made the cubic inch limitation.
How big were your big blocks, you and Paxton and them guys?
The one on the wall over there was 490 inches. but when they cut them down to 440, and they were still heavy, and they lost any kind of advantage. But the things that big blocks had that were nice was you could run many races without freshening them up. You didn't have to turn them 12,000 RPM or whatever.
Yeah.
That's an exaggeration. But big blocks were pretty cost effective.
Yeah.
And then I believe that the reason that they became extinct is because the Outlaws dictated what could and couldn't run. And so there was no reason to keep having a big block if when the Outlaws came in here and you weren't allowed to use it.
Yeah. When you started building your own cars, what do you remember as being trick stuff that you could really tell difference? Was it weight a factor back then, or were they built to go to war?
We always tried to make them as light as we could just because that made sense. But I believe the most effective anything that I ever felt on a car as far as how it made the car transfer different or do anything was an inboard brake.
Really?
When we had an inboard brake, remember Sammy Swindell had one for a whole year before anybody else did.
Okay.
And it was ahead of his time.
Wow. What does that
do?
do?
The inboard brake, when you hit the brakes, it squats the car because it leverages the torque tube down.
Gotcha.
Where when you regular brakes, it torques up that. So it just made the car squat and do everything. I mean, that's
when you want it to squat.
That's the most distinctive anything I ever remember doing. Obviously, when you had a big stout motor and it was hitting hard, that felt good. But as far as the chassis dynamics, the inboard brake was the most difference that I ever remember feeling.
When you first started running there in the early 70s, were the humper tires just starting out? Were they around, or was that coming on?
Well, they were common, but they had just become common. They were the way to go. No, the very first tire that I bought when I got here was a drag tire. I mean, because that's what you had to have. I believe do you remember M&H's?
I do.
M&H's were common, and Firestone just got in it. I mean, Firestones became the norm.
Yeah.
But for sure, they used to run M&H's and Firestones also. It seems to me like there was an M&H carcass that was a 16-inch wheel. I can't remember why or what, but something sticks in my mind that the M&H's were 16-inch.
And you would buy those slicks and groove them yourself, and
that's another thing we were we did a lot of grooving, but that was another thing. We lived Vic Speed Shop. I don't know if you've ever heard of Vic Speed Shop. It's about 2 miles over here in McSherrystown. They had readily grooved tires.
Wow.
I mean, Vic would get the tires in, and he had a grooving machine, and he would set up and groove them.
So
and
they were
dismount 'em.
halfway consistent.
So when well, not just that, they were already done. I mean,
Yeah.
if you had I don't know, it seemed to be like a right rear probably was $100 at that time maybe,
Yeah.
but that was grooved and ready to go, and he mounted them up for you, and this was before tubeless tires, so there was a big heavy tube involved, and lots of work, and so that's pretty lucky when you can just go to a speed shop and give them the wheel and
Yeah.
and come out with a ready to go tire. But I was right when drag tires were becoming effective.
Was there any different compound technology yet?
There was real soft up through a couple of different hardnesses, and it was just like now people they want to be on as soft as they can for as long as they can.
Yeah.
I don't think it was quite so common. I mean tires right now probably durometer in the 30s, the soft ones do. But there was soft and hard, and people did change.
Wow. When let's talk about wings for a second, because in my part of the country, when I was growing up as a kid, everything around Southern Ohio and Indiana was wings. Lawrenceburg was a wing track. All that was wings. And then it transferred over to non-wings there in the 90s, and in 2000s everything was non-wing. But I want to talk about like the development of wings. I know the first wings that I saw running were kind of narrow, and the side panels weren't as big as they are today. Who was leading that charge of like figuring out wings? And
Well, when we
was
first
it
came
all
here,
just total
when
trial and error?
When we first came here, even the fast car, even Hamilton's cars and stuff like that, the wings were just plywood.
Okay.
They were not really an airfoil at all. They were just a wedge.
Just a flat wedge.
And then Stevie Smith and Bobby and some other people had some aluminum, effectively airfoils, and they just kept getting bigger and bigger. I believe Kenny Weld was probably one of the first people to have 5x5s and 5.5s. I mean, big. He had big motors and big wings, and that added up to winning lots of races.
Were front wings around right away, or did that come later?
They came a little later. There was a good while they ran around here without front wings because they made them illegal. I don't know why.
I've seen pictures of cars with no front wings. That's why I asked.
Any of what you've heard of cars, it was Jack Gunn. It was 312s. They had actually made it small, which was uncommon to the country, except if you think about it, the USAC cars were 302s. So it kind of went more into line with that size motor. But wings just got bigger and motors got bigger. I don't remember who actually was the first people to be fast with big blocks. I guess probably Weichert and Paxton,
Yeah,
Hamilton. And I had a pretty decent big block.
that's excellent.
But for sure, big blocks got phased out when the Outlaws changed the
Yep.
rules.
What was the last year you built a race car?
Well, actually, I only built a race car myself in '73. The first one, the car that I won the Williams Grove Nationals with, was a car I built as a coilover car. I had changed it to torsion front at that time, but it won races either way. But that was actually the only car I ever built. Ben Cook came on and helped me build all of my cars from that time on.
How'd you meet Ben? Just met him at the racetrack?
Yeah, he kind of came up and he wanted me to be running one of his cars.
He was older at the time than you? I mean,
Ben's about my same. Has been the
old man?
The old man. I'm not sure, but Ben Cook and Bill Cook, the ones that were actually building the cars, they were about my age,
Okay,
I believe.
those are the guys I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say they
Because
were
I
about
saw
my age.
I saw a picture of you. I was looking at old pictures of Williams Grove the other day, and I saw a picture of you talking to the older Ben Cook, the old
Okay,
man.
yeah.
And I didn't even know of him. I knew
Yeah,
the Ben
ha-
Cooks I know.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, for sure.
Where did they get there? Were they local guys and just always fast? Did they ever drive?
Well, you
were
know,
they car owners?
in all honesty, they didn't drive. They built cars from long time ago. Did you see that sprint car that in the museum that was restored? It was the first Cook car.
Yeah, they just
Anyhow-
finished it like a year or two
Anyhow,
ago.
and I don't remember what all car they were building when I became involved, but after the car that I ran at Syracuse was their car, and when it got torn up, they built a new one just kind of because they wanted me to have a new one, and they continually helped me. Ben Cook helped a lot. I mean, they were very capable of building good race cars, and they were very flexible about building them. If you wanted something a little different, they were not opposed to it. They weren't just saying, "Look, this is what you
Yeah.
get.
Were you
Shut up and sit down."
when you were running the Ben Cook cars? Where was that out of their shop,
No, they built the
was-
cars in their shop, but
okay.
then they wound up back down here.
and that was your engines and your horsepower and whatnot?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Because I see the Ben Cook name on your cars from back in the day. What was the furthest you traveled back then for racing? I mean, would you go for Ohio Speed Weeks and all that?
I did go to Ohio Speed Weeks. I won the finale at the Ohio Speed Weeks in probably '84.
Where do you remember where?
Zanesville, Ohio. It paid $10,000, but I didn't have any trouble counting it. That was in 1984. But as far as the farthest I went, I guess with my own car, I drove to Champaign, Illinois one time. I went to Knoxville, but I drove Ben Cook's car, so all I did was just got on the airplane and lit.
Okay.
And so I can't relate to that as being a long drive.
Did you only run Knoxville once or a few times?
2 times. The first time I was there, I was in Ben Cook's car, and my very first lap at Knoxville was quick time for the Nationals.
Wow.
And I ran, and they had a point system, and I started in the back of my heat, and got to second behind Rocky Hodges. So that was like the second most amount of points that I could have accumulated. And then in the feature, they inverted, I think 8. And by having quick time, I started 8 in the preliminary main. This is at the Nationals.
Yeah.
I started 8th, and I think I finished 7th or 8th, right around there where I started. So that accumulated the 6th most amount of points on my given night,
Uh-huh.
which started me 12th.
Okay.
And Steve Kinzer, having a bad year, obviously, to be back here with me, he started 11th. And when they did for the money race at Knoxville in Ben Cook's car, which I was driving, that was very fast, Kinzer stuffed me in the wall on the start of the race, and I flipped down the front straightaway and never even took the green.
Damn.
So effectively, I was at Knoxville with a very fast race car that I didn't get a chance to
Yeah.
run.
Yeah. Shit.
And then I ran one more time. A couple of years, I ran a guy's car from Dallas, Swofford. Mr. Swofford was his name. Have you ever heard of Norman Martin? He actually won.
I've read that name.
Anyhow, I ran a car from Dallas, and I was fast enough to be in the front of the B main. I backed up out of qualifying position, and that was my result.
Wow. Well, you mentioned Steve, and I want to talk about the Pennsylvania attitude and the Pennsylvania posse, and what some people might not realize is, and I've talked a little bit about it on my Instagram this week, is that Pennsylvania is one of the, if not the only place in the country where the top racers of the World Outlaws, to All-Stars, anyone you can think of throughout the years, when they come here to race, the locals can kick their ass. And it happens. It's happened before, and it still happens. And nowadays, a lot of the Pennsylvania guys do become outlaws and go that route. When you moved here, was the Pennsylvania versus everyone else in full effect? Were you guys your own thing?
I don't think so. I think the Pennsylvania posse versus the Outlaws and all that rivalry came about as when the World of Outlaws became the World of Outlaws, we became the Pennsylvania posse.
Mm-hmm.
That was the nemesis of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then obviously they built it up and built it up and built it up. But when I came to Pennsylvania, I didn't think of it being anything more than just the place to be to race.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, the Pennsylvania cars were consistently faster than anywhere else, and I believe it's because of it's just like if you played pool every day, you'd get better at it. And in Pennsylvania, they ran 3 nights a week, sometimes 4, and so just repetition.
Yeah, yeah.
And the fact that you could make a living doing it made people spend money doing it, and so it just developed more thoroughly. The Outlaws versus the Pennsylvania Posse just became effective as a rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
They build it. They build it.
It's fun.
And
it's cool.
there's Pennsylvania Posse fans around here that sound like idiots. I mean, seriously. They say things and you think, man, where in the hell did they come from?
Yeah.
But that's how it is, and they're fans, and they pay their money, and they go to the races happy,
Yes.
and sometimes come home happy.
I've noticed that, and I've told people that you'll never see fans like Pennsylvania sprint car fans. You guys fill the stands. It's like, you take Port Royal, for instance. You go to Port Royal and you're standing behind the grandstands, and the road you're on, like the driveway you're on, if you turn to your right and look, it goes down right into the town and turns into like one of the main streets of the town. And then when we were there, it's like 5 o'clock, the gates are open, and you can see this just massive sea of people walking from the town up to the racetrack. And it's literally the thing to do in the town on Friday night. It's what the whole town, like all the kids, and it's so odd because like a lot of places in the country, young kids are not going to the sprint car races, but in Pennsylvania, it's the thing to do on the weekend night.
Well, I think that Pennsylvania is facing some of that same thing. People are more buried in their telephone.
Yeah.
Not that that's a fact of life. But Pennsylvania had racing that was real good, and back at that time, there wasn't as many other things to do.
Yeah.
There wasn't so many other options.
No internet,
no. The internet has
no Netflix.
Effectively changed. No, seriously,
Yeah.
it's a lot different. And they're struggling around here sometimes to get crowds.
Wow.
And people. I mean, just like Williams Grove, as often as not, has just barely a full field.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that the fast guys aren't still fast.
Yeah.
And I don't think you need more than 20 cars to make a good race.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen good races with less than that. But Pennsylvania they became avid fans because I don't actually know what made it develop so thoroughly, but they are definitely.
I like when I travel through Pennsylvania. If I'm here for the vintage racing, or if we're going to the Race of Gentlemen in New Jersey, you can stop at a gas station anywhere in Pennsylvania, especially around here, and you'll see just people wearing sprint car shirts.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
It's just normal people every day, everyday folks, and they're wearing sprint car shirts. And I notice it because it sticks out to me because I'm not used to seeing that.
Yeah, for sure.
If around Cincinnati, if you see a guy wearing a sprint car shirt, you know him. It's your buddy. You know him.
Yeah. But here, sprint car shirts and hats and stuff are very common.
Yeah, the USAC guys that I'm buddies with, when they come here for the Eastern Swing, they literally have to restock all their shirts and hats for this trip.
Yeah,
but the Pennsylvania fans will flat buy some shirts. And buy
yeah,
hats.
there is a lot of money in T-shirts, and I'm telling you that there is no telling how much money Steve Kinzer has probably
It's amazing.
made up and down the road selling T-shirts.
I'm proud of him.
I mean,
It's
for
amazing.
sure, rightfully so.
Yeah.
But I'm saying T-shirts
It's insane.
for a lot of people, a lot of racers, they help pay the way.
You've got a couple shirts. I saw a Van May shirt at the Williams Grove last
there's
night.
a few of them. That's funny. When I hadn't had a T-shirt of my own for 30 years or something, and when that whole thing came about, I had that one made, and I was very, very happy with. I mean, they immediately sold out, and I got more, and they immediately sold out. And I did not get more because it was at the end of the season. I wish I would have had more, but it wasn't worth investing another $1,000 just to have shirts to set on for the winter. But yeah, I was quite pleased with the response of those T-shirts.
Let's go back to the Williams Grove Open. The Williams Grove Open is one of the most prestigious races in this area, and especially at Williams Grove. Williams Grove is a racetrack that's been around for 100 years. It's one of the more legendary historical racetracks in the country. It's been called the Ascot of the East. I mean, it's where it's at. And when you go there, it's one of those places that you can feel the history in the air. When you walk over bridge over the track, it gets to you, and you know that serious shit happened there. And the Williams Grove Open's one of their big race, if not their biggest race, and you won that race. What tell us about that? What was that like?
Well, that,
I mean, were you on a tear all year?
no, but I had just won a race previously at Williams Grove on a daytime show that with similar conditions and everything. But I was happy that my car turned out being competitive that day. When I went out for time trials, I wasn't fast enough to even make the field because I got a bad number and I went out late and I was too slow.
Yeah.
But my combination was pretty good at the end, and I wound up ultimately winning. I won the Consi, and I had to start in the rear of the feature, and ultimately I won the feature.
Won it from the tail.
Well, as tail as it
Yeah,
gets.
damn. I didn't know that, man.
As tail as it gets. But I guess that was fond memories of just winning a race that was so historical. It's funny because really Williams Grove has all the history, but there are fast racers all over the country and winning their given nights racing, but they don't get the same credit because it's not Williams Grove.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so that was one of the things that I'll, forever I will go down on the back of a T-shirt, and that's something to be proud of, and I'm glad it happened that way. It was a long day. It when I started out, for sure in the back, and it was running 350 lap segments.
Really?
And
how does that work?
Well, at 50 laps you stop and everybody refuels, and the people with money retired. I mean, had fresh
It's
rubber.
basically open red.
Basically open red 3 times. So it's 3 different 50 lap.
Do you
races.
reline up or do you stay the way you were?
You stay the way you are.
Okay.
But that particular race, I had one brand new right rear for the final, and it worked out well. Everything worked out well. I wasn't spinning my wheels, and
do you remember where you might have just mentioned it? Where did you finish on the first 50 and the second 50?
I don't remember exactly. I advanced some the first 50 and some the second 50. I don't think I got into the lead till 12 laps from the end.
Wow.
Of 150 laps. Well, so
did you?
It was a long day of passing cars.
Man, what'd that pay back then?
$3,000. but it paid more. It paid more than anybody else got.
Yeah, that was a hell of a day.
It paid,
God,
for sure.
That's cool. Wow, that is so neat. What? Tell me about some other big wins.
I did have a bunch of big wins, but I did win a $10,000 Ohio Speed Week race in Ben Cook's car, and that was the most money I've ever made, was on one given night. But that was in '84, so $10,000 is a lot more common now than it was in '84.
Yeah. Let's talk about, part of the reason why you're so well known and got the name you do is because you were fast and consistent and won a lot, and you were always right there at it. Before I get to some other stuff, we were talking about the Pennsylvania Posse and you mentioned it when you said you weren't a USAC guy. And what I think you meant by that was the USAC guys at that time seemed to be real clean cut, kind of more business-like.
Yeah,
and
white,
then you got
white
the Outlaws.
uniforms.
Yeah.
And you have to have Magnaflux papers for your axle if you get in any kind of scuffle. It was just very many rules, and
I mean, in Pennsylvania, guys were a little more outlaw and a little. Yeah,
for sure. Our cars were a little rougher looking. Actually, a lot rougher looking. But that was because they raced for a living. They were worried more about having a motor that was hitting hard than having chrome all over the car.
Yeah, and you can tell that when you look at the pictures.
But I mean, I think in all honesty, I think what put Pennsylvania on the map effectively was when USAC came in here and Mitch Smith thumped them pretty thoroughly on a couple of different occasions, and so it's just that's what they capitalized. That's what they capitalized on, was the fact that he did do that. And then Mitch Smith he obviously won races around here, so it wasn't like he was surprisingly fast, but when he took the wing off, he was surprisingly fast also.
That's so cool.
But you know what? when we ran here, we didn't run all with wings. I mean, there was not as many races without wings, but it was not uncommon to run without a wing.
What would mandate that? Just whoever was in charge of the sanction that night?
You know, I don't actually remember. I remember running some races where they ran one wing, one with, and one off.
Oh wow,
No,
that'd be
they
cool.
ran, like
Yeah.
this 50 or one on and one off.
That'd be cool.
But wings for sure. If you look at the history of sprint car racing, the first guy that won Knoxville Nationals, he won it with a wing, even though wings weren't common. The first guy that won the Williams Grove Nationals was Gordon Johncock, and he won it with a wing, not really common, but a wing helped.
Yeah.
The guy that won the first Pacific Coast Open at Ascot was Jimmy Wood, and he won it with a wing. And can you imagine running? I mean, I've seen races and lineups where you see some cars with wings and some cars without.
Yeah.
And actually, at that time, first off, the wings weren't quite as efficient as they are now. They weren't as big and they weren't as well designed, but they did run both ways, and I didn't mind running with or without a wing. I mean, that didn't seem like a determining factor as whether I can't run a wing or I can't run without a wing.
Yeah.
It's just that we ran wings commonly because wings make the car faster. They're a little ugly to the purist. They're a little ugly, but a car's not ugly if it's in victory lane.
That's a good way to put
I
it.
mean, Smokey Snellback, the Pocket Rocket really wasn't a very good looking car. But when it went out there and made 17-second laps and everybody else made 18, it was a little better looking.
Yeah, everyone started liking it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some hard rides. You've had a couple over the years. Tell me. I know that you got hit in the eye with something at one point.
2 points actually, but
Ten.
I guess the worst crash as far as hurting that I ever felt was probably Port Royal.
That was one you were airlifted out.
Yeah, it broke my collarbone and broke my cheek and everything, but
That was there's video of that, and
it looked violent. It looked violent, and like I say, they did haul me off, and I don't remember anything. So I was hurt. But like people talk about big crashes, and Syracuse has always come to mind of everybody. They say, oh, this, that, and everything. But that particular crash, as it turned out, I wasn't even really that sore. I'm not saying I wasn't a little bit seatbelt, but I drove home that night, and
the Syracuse crash is the one that you ended up with there's no roll cage, no nothing.
Yeah, for sure.
And you reach up for the cage when you went to get out.
Well, you know, that's funny because once again, that is just instinct, and I think that's exactly what I did. More people than one have told the story. Oh, I saw that, or I saw that, and I do believe that simply
you would have, yeah.
out of instinct, I grabbed up for the cage and it wasn't there.
What caused the Syracuse wreck? I mean, I've only seen pictures.
Let me see if it's got on. Okay,
No, Brian. Yep.
I would say that the Syracuse wreck was caused by a car spinning out and funneling up into my lane, and there was no place to go.
And this is a sprint car on a mile, so you're.
I was on a sprint.
flying.
I was in a sprint car. The car that got out of shape was a super modified,
Okay.
like an Oswego super modified.
Yeah.
Wide and whatever. I don't remember what
So
the
you guys
situation
are
was. But
running
he
every
spun.
bit of 100, 110, maybe.
I would say we were running more than that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
whatever we were running, it came to an abrupt halt at that, and shit flew everywhere.
Wow. Damn.
But that was one of those things that crash keeps getting brought up and this and that, and I don't mind. But the reason it was because it was in the first open wheel,
Okay.
and it was in front of probably Syracuse held 20,000 people, 30,000, huh? So there was a lot of people there that just witnessed it, and the stories get
Oh, yeah.
told and
Yeah,
retold
yeah.
and everything.
I mean,
But I was glad that one is over, and the people will remember that one way or another, whether it be good or bad. They'll remember it for a long time.
Everyone we've had podcasts with, has had their hard ride stories.
Yeah,
It's part of racing.
I'd say that was one of the most devastating looking with Syracuse and Port Royal.
Do you remember what caused the Port Royal one? Because in the video, you guys are just all flying and you're
Yes.
tight and you're close and
There was a guy named Kenny Nunn, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and he broke a rear end or something. Whatever. He came to an abrupt halt at the end of the straightaway,
Shit.
and Port Royal's got a real long, narrow.
fast.
It used to be dark. Port Royal's the best lights of anywhere now, and they used to be by far the worst lights. But anyhow, that crash was caused by somebody braking in front of me, and I was just along for the
you're
ride.
Coming. Wow. And then what got you in the eye? And a rock? You joked to me one day and you said it was a short block.
Yeah, it's something big. I don't know. I'll show you the I have the.
Did you have a visor, a full face
I
helmet?
I have the helmet, and I have the full face visor that was on, and the visor is all distorted where that piece of whatever it was hit it. I'll show it to you in a minute. But anyway, I don't know. That was the most devastating to my career.
Yeah.
That was the last race I ran. For real,
Yeah.
was at Port Royal, and I don't even know. Just came off somebody's tire, and
One
I
of them
stopped
things.
it.
Yep. My dad, that does all that pinstriping and lettering and sign painting, he's got one eye, so doesn't slow either one of you guys down.
You know, really, it's hard to imagine. There's somebody else, I can't remember who it was. Maybe Bruce Walkup or somebody I heard that used to race successfully with one eye.
Yeah.
And I have never raced period since I got my eye put out. But I had that same eye that got injured, that got destroyed, got injured once real severely. That same eye at Eldora, a rock came back and hit me in the eye, and it broke my glasses. And my glasses went in, and I went through what they call a traumatic cataract. They removed the lens, and from that time on, and that was in the late 70s, I raced and pretty successful, and I had a contact lens in that eye that took up the optics. You know, you see people with real thick bottle glasses.
Yeah.
That's the optics that's involved when you have a cataract. But anyhow, I had some success with my eye being hurt, but not ruined.
What with after you stopped racing, you kept on building stuff and fabricating, and you developed a rear end tool. When you stopped racing, did you own cars and have anyone else drive for you, or did you just go into building stuff?
Actually, Weldon Sterner, who was my sponsor, he continued to sponsor a car and let me keep it here in my garage and run out of my garage. But once again, he paid the bills and I helped distribute the money.
Yeah.
So it worked out real well. I mean, I was, and then as far as that tool, I made that out of necessity. I'll show you the original model of that right there, the Virgin model.
Cool.
But anyway, I sold lots of those tools, and they didn't make me rich, but they did make me not have to get a job as much.
That's cool. Now we come up to today, and when I met you with vintage cars, and you were there, and it was you knew the Ellison Sprint car, you knew it from online, and you had kind of knew about it, and it was an honor to be able to stick you in that car at Lattimore Valley and the 23 car. That was cool. What was your thoughts on running an old non-cage car like that?
Well, you know, the fact that it didn't have a cage, I didn't even really think about it. Once they drop the green, you don't see stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't go out there with a plan like, man, I better be careful. But I did have a good time playing. I was so tickled when I finally got the damn thing started.
I forgot about that.
Seriously, we had pushed it one complete lap, and it never would turn over because it had a lot of compression and no traction.
Yep.
And when it finally did fire off, I was so tickled. I don't even know if they had a green flag or checkered. I don't know anything. I was just so happy when that car started. But that was fun.
Yep, I got to follow you. In one session, I got to follow you, and man, it was fun. You know, you were running hard and having fun, and I knew anyone that raced and was around race cars knew you were having fun. You weren't running balls out. You were having fun. You were slinging a lot of dirt. I'm sure to some people they thought you were just flying with everything you had, but you were having fun, and it looked good, and I liked it. It was fun to see that.
Well, it would have been fun today. That would have been a fun day, but
Yeah.
I was looking forward to that, and maybe again sometime.
That's right. Where we sit here today, we're at the Jalopy Showdown, and I towed the Ellison car up here, and to make this event is really hard for myself and Joey Kerr and Mike Whitney, because this is the week before the Indy cars run at the vintage Indy cars, and we've all got Indy cars we have to prep. Joey's got cars he's getting ready, Mike's busy, and luckily this year we're only dealing with rear engine cars, so I didn't have any major Indy cars to get ready. So I was able to bring the car up, and I called you and said, I'd love to have you drive it, and we went to Lincoln, and I fired the car off and built heat, and the plan was I was going to take it out and run it in the first session and kind of shake it down and then hand it to you the rest of the day. And I made 2 laps and broke something. I picked up a really bad vibration in the driveline, and to the point I know what I'm feeling. Something came apart and would have gotten way worse. And I felt bad for you and Larry and all the fans that wanted to see the car run, but
it is what it is.
it is. I'm sure you've towed racetracks before and had that happen.
I'm not going to go home sad tonight. I was kind of looking forward to it, but through no fault of anybody's. And
Yep.
actually, I'm glad I didn't break it, or I'd have got to blame.
Oh, yeah, you'd have felt
I'd
terrible.
probably get to blame anyhow.
Well, I've been telling everyone all day that the car was scared of you. It
Yeah,
knew you
well,
were coming.
All right, well.
It said, "Oh shit, Van's
All right,
coming. I got to
all right.
break something." It spit a
All
part
right.
out. But
All right, well.
what? Tell me about these 2 hot rod pickups you got here. You're building hot rods now. I mean, I know you got
Well,
some neat
not
cars,
really.
but
The blue and
what year is that? 50,
It's 58.
58.
The blue one's drivable. The red one was drivable. The Ford I brought with me when my mother passed away in Texas in probably 70. I could say 78 or 79, something like that. When we went to Texas and they had not like a yard sale, but like a get what you want type deal. We're closing shop type.
Yeah.
And I bought what that red truck is. I bought it with a bad motor in it and overhauled the motor at a buddy of mine's garage, and we loaded it down with all kinds of stuff from my household and drove it back to Pennsylvania. And it was a usable truck for a while, but at this point it's just sitting there on the floor, not rusting.
Well, to further that to the people that are listening, I'm looking at the truck and it's sitting there with a winter's quick change in it and IndyCar Eagle wheels off of a 60 or 70s?
66 Gurney Eagle.
Gurney Eagle wheels on this thing. I mean, it's a badass piece. It's going to be a neat truck. I got a couple more questions that are kind of just jumping all over the place. Tell me about towing a sprint car to the track with a Corvette.
That's funny because that's all I had was a Corvette, and I'm not complaining, but it was just something that it's kind of like going to Pennsylvania. I didn't really plan on going to Pennsylvania, but when it came about and I pulled with a Corvette, that Corvette actually,
What year was it?
It was a 70 model. It was the last of the high compression motors before they detuned them, and it was the last of the high torque 454s, and it didn't even one gear is about all you needed. I mean, seriously, and I just pulled around and parked close to my brother. He had the tools.
Yeah.
And so that's just how it worked out.
When you think when you think back about your racing in Pennsylvania in the 70s and up through the years, who comes to mind as the toughest competitor, guy hard to race with? Good racer, but just a guy that was always going to be racing you hard, other than all of them.
Well, when I first got here, Bobby Allen and Kenny Weld and Stevie Smith were all the guys to beat. And I don't remember any one of them in particular. I don't remember any particular specific person that I had to deal with that I worried about one way or another. But basically, my whole racing, I went there and I went there not as an underdog, but I had good equipment but I didn't ever win enough races that I got to be the bad guy. You know how?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, like if Stevie Smith won 6 in a row or 8 in a row, or
They
Raymer
start
or
booing
what,
him.
then they're the bad guys. Well, I'm not saying there weren't people that didn't think I was a dip, but they didn't just get bored with the fact that I was going. No, I won inconsistently enough that it was still fun.
Yeah. You hear guys. I hear guys booing Donnie Schatz
Yeah.
because he wins. God, he wins a bunch, you know. And I know
They're
some
not
of
they're not booing him near as much now.
No, but
That is true.
Well, the last time that Dad and I were at Williams Grove's been a couple years, and I remember Scott's car pushed out on the track to qualify.
And they just
And we were standing in the infield of 3, so Schatz was on the track, and on the other side of Schatz was the Beer Hill gang.
and they're loud.
Oh my God! I mean, the beer cans were flying, and the shit they were yelling, I can't repeat. And
They don't call it Beer Hill for nothing.
it was entertaining, and to Donnie Schatz's credit, he just had a smile on his face. Him and the guy on the 4-wheeler, they were laughing.
Probably got paid for winning.
Yes. Oh yeah. I believe he won that night. I asked you earlier a question that was just a general question. What was one or two of the times you felt in a race car that you felt, God damn, we're flying. This is fast.
You know, when you asked that, I wasn't sure, and I don't remember any specific times, but I do remember sometimes when I would go out there and I would be on less stagger than what would be normal or what would be somebody else's decision, and halfway through the race when my car would start being fast and it would pay off because of that same thing.
And you're just passing
And
two cars a lap.
passing cars while they're spinning their wheels.
Man, that's cool. Yeah, that does have to feel good. That is excellent.
I got to win enough races to know what it's all about, but not enough of them to be bored.
I've noticed my favorite thing is to walk through an infield or any kind of racetrack with you in Pennsylvania, because you don't notice it because you're talking and you're telling me stories, but people part ways and they say hi to you and they stop what they're doing and they say that's Van May, and I mean you're well respected in these areas, and that's excellent. That's a cool thing. That's very neat. You've earned it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and the people that come up to me and treat me well. That's good. There's bound to be about that same number of people on the other side of the story that are badmouth me and said, "You son of a bitch." But you just learn to deal with that, and I'm happy that I got to win enough races that they knew I was the factor.
That's cool. That's very cool.
But never, like I say, but I don't think I ever won enough races that people got to be bored with it.
No, not at all. Not at all. Van, thank you.
All right, well,
man, thank you so
good,
much.
Good having this visit.
I promise you,
appreciate
I
it.
won't break the car next time for you before
right.
you can run it.
Well, you know what's kind of neat is sitting down here with you and having this discussion is that you understand race cars and racing quite a bit, where a lot of people, when they want to interview you or talk to you, they don't really know questions other than just, I mean,
Yeah,
they
I
don't
appreciate
they don't understand it as well what they're asking in regards to things.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting. I appreciate y'all coming. I cleaned up my shop just for you.
Heck yeah.
But I'm glad you did it. I appreciate it.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
seeing you.
Bye.